Hi, I'm your host Vasco Duarte. Welcome to the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast, where we share tips and tricks from Scrum Masters around the world. Every day, we bring you inspiring answers to important questions that all Scrum Masters face day after day. Hello everybody, welcome to our Wednesday, the Leading Change episode this week with Omar Perez. Hey Omar, welcome back.
Hello.
So Omar, Wednesdays is Change Day here on the podcast, and we want to dive into that change process, the things we learn, and of course the tools, the tips, the tricks, the techniques you experienced and learned back then that you still apply today. So tell us that story, Omar.
Whoa, change, my favorite topic. The Scrum Guide says we are change agents, but doesn't say much more. So I had to spend a lot of time and effort and money in training myself as a change, manager and systemic, coach and other things. And I still think I have a lot to learn. So let's when things are under my control, on my sphere of control or influence, is usually on the team level, right? I wish I had more influence, as an Agile coach or Scrum Master at the organizational level, but we don't have a seat on the table. So I like to, for upper management to consider that we are trained as many Scrum Masters are trained to at least participate in those conversations about rework, but somehow they don't take us into account. They want us to keep us as team debuggers or optimizers, if you want, and stay there. So I'll talk about a team that I changed. In one of the retrospective, a team member challenged me, said, "Why do you keep on calling them user stories if no one actually talks to users in this company?" That was a good question. So I took the challenge and said, "Okay, you guys want to talk to users? Let's do that. Let's get out of the building." But in one of my previous lives, I was trained as a design thinker, so I know thing or two about doing that. So basically I spent maybe a good couple of months training the team on how to interact with users, because I saw a lot of two things. First, in securing interviews with users, that took a long effort, talking to all these managers, all these, PMOs or whatever, because they didn't want to, they don't want us to talk to the end users. In this case, it was a industrial manufacturer and very traditional in their ways of thinking. So basically I had to secure those interviews or those interactions or those workshops. And it was tricky because those people, we secure all the permissions, but at the end they were reluctant to talk to us, the end users. You know why? Because they thought we were going to automatize their job. That once we build this application, what they did with Excel and the phone and email, it will be replaced by some sort of automatic, artificial intelligence, application. So they were not collaborative. They were coming up with excuses. We don't have the time. We're too busy, whatever. But they were afraid of losing their job, to this application. So it took me a lot of convincing them that it was actually so they could focus more on added value, do better, more intelligent.
Yeah, thank God you had some lean background and you could talk the language, right? Because not knowing about the reducing waste and not knowing about value stream, not knowing about adding value, that conversation could have been very difficult.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So once we got everyone into the room, I had trained the team in not looking for validation. Basically, I have this solution. What do you think? You like it or not like it? Those were, very linear thinking. So I trained the team on how to actually look for the pain points. And sometimes the pain points are not something they state directly. You need to read in between lines or you need to uncover them. So and I even secured, that was hard, that they could spend one day at the factory with them, just as observers, like anthropologists. So that they loved it. Both sides loved it. At the beginning, it was a little bit of Hawthorne effect, meaning people were not acting naturally because they felt observed by these tech people. But after a while, they relaxed, and then they were asking questions like, "Why do you do that?" And so if we did this way, so it was technically only an observation, but because there was so the interaction between both, they actually became an act of spontaneous co-creation or co-design why don't we do that? Oh yeah, that'll be great. But if we did this, so instead of like using it in a formal workshop, which we also did a few in the offices, I think that the most productive session was actually in the factory, observing those people, how they worked, and asking questions, and then proposing some suggestions by the team. I also tried to like prevent the PO for intervening too much, and it was great. It was a great experience.
So when you think about this, let's call it like transformational perspective over how we work, right? Because before, the team was not looking at the users, wasn't even allowed to talk to the users. And then through the work that you did, you kind of opened the door and created the opportunities for them to first talk to the users and eventually even watch them in their environment, working with what might be the context of the software that they were producing. If you think about that, like, what are some of the key lessons you learn from that experience that you think, if we're like, for example, let's take another transformational perspective to include testers in the team, because there are many teams out there who still have testers outside the team, right? Like they do stuff and, at the end of the sprint, they throw it over the wall and send it to a testing team or whatever that might be, like system testing team or whatever. Like this is about like looking at our work with different eyes, like understanding the value of that transformation, but also then making it happen. What were the key things that you think worked in that context to provide that transformation?
First they it was hard to get them out of their comfort zone, right? Because we're set in our ways and it's difficult. So they need to trust you. They trust in your expertise and your experience. So at the end of the day, a company or a team, it's a network of relationships. That's why, it takes time to make change happen, because first they need to trust you, and they also observe you, that you model, that you practice what you preach, that you walk your talk, that you eat sometimes even your dog food, right? So it took time, so because otherwise I just felt like a trainer, when I was a Scrum at the beginning, they felt me like I was a trainer or some sort of, telling them what to do or what the Agile playbook says. So for me, that was the key. And then making the transition as progressive as possible, and approaching them to the, in this case, to the users. And by the way, the whole team was there. Even the tester, the QA was there. Because at the beginning, they only want the PO and maybe one like a tech lead or some like senior engineer. Said, no. It's the whole team. Said, oh, but that's too many people. And I want the whole team. It's the unit of thinking in Agile is the team. So I want the whole team to be there, and because sometimes the best ideas actually came from the QA, not from the lead, the most senior engineer. The best ideas, the suggestions, they came from the QA. And they start also sometimes having technical debates, even before they designed or they coded any story, they were having these technical debates, like some sort of refinement session while observing so it was great. It was transformational in the sense that also getting them outside, as Steve Blank used to say, get people out of the building. It feels scary at the beginning, there's all this fear, but once you do it, it's a transformation.
Yeah, and it's very empowering, right? Like the moment that the team accepts that, yes, they need to get out, and then they go out, and then they start interacting with in this case, the users, and see them in their context, because it triggers so many ideas immediately, right? I bet that after you visited the factory, it was hard to keep them from suggesting more things, because they probably saw so many things they never thought about.
Yeah, and that's where the PO actually, took the reins and said, "Okay, let's prioritize." But it was great. I've never seen such an act of co-creation, co-design. We always use the word "co," in Agile, but that was for me the best instance that I've experienced myself.
Absolutely, and a great example of a transformational change. Thank you for sharing that, Omar. Mm-hmm. Leading change is one of the core skills we must acquire, but it is only one of the steps towards our success as Scrum Masters. Tomorrow, on Success Thursday, we will talk about how to define success for the Scrum Master role. We'll cover tips on how to measure your way to that position, and most importantly, how to develop that focus on continuous improvement that is as important for Scrum Masters as it is for teams. See you tomorrow. We really hope you liked our show. And if you did, why not rate this podcast on Stitcher or iTunes? Share this podcast and let other Scrum Masters know about this valuable resource for their work. Remember that sharing is caring.